Pixar. They've made us laugh, they've made us cry, they've put us through an existential crisis. They're amazing. We love them. Despite these movies being primarily made for kids, they still mostly manage to be mature and enjoyable for all ages. And they just released their new movie, Elio. And so, where does it rank in their catalogue? Well, let's find out, because I'm going to be ranking everything that they've made from worst to best. Obviously, there will be spoilers for a handful of these movies, so just keep that in mind. And now, let's jump into the video. So, how does one determine the worst Pixar movie? I mean, every Pixar movie is loved in some way, so with that logic, what I rank at the bottom here will upset some people, but just so you know, I'm not making this video to tell you what you want to hear. I'm here to tell you my honest opinion. So here it goes, viewer discretion is advised. Okay, my least favorite Pixar movie is Cars. No, I'm not trolling, I have just never really been a big fan of Cars. I have many friends that grew up with Cars, they love it, and I'm very happy for them. This movie just doesn't really do anything for me, but I'll at least address my positives I have about the movie first. Because even though it's my least favorite Pixar movie, I still found some enjoyable aspects. The soundtrack? Fantastic. The animation? Pretty great. I think it holds up for the most part and really shines during the racing sequences. Lightning 2 has a really good arc, and I enjoy everything with him and Doc. I can definitely see why people love this movie. So why does it just not work for me? Well, I just find everything in Radiator Springs to just be such a chore to sit through, and it's made even more unpleasant with the addition of Mater, who I just find kind of annoying in all of these movies. I can't stand him. I just wanted him to shut up most of the time. He made me laugh like once, but otherwise, he can be thrown into the incinerator for all I care. I think the truth behind why I don't like Cars is because I personally just wanted a movie about racing to have, well, lots of racing in it. If it were up to me at least, for the sake of my enjoyment, I would have just focused on Doc training McQueen more. That would have made my personal experience a lot better. One major reason why I think Cars 3, which I'll talk about later, is significantly better than Cars 1 is because everything in that movie relates to racing and there are hardly any distractions. I felt the stakes at hand regarding Jackson Storm because Cars 3 is entirely built upon McQueen trying to improve. In Cars 1, he has a race to get to, but he's just kind of goofing around with NPCs until he fixes the road that he destroyed. Legit feels like some video game side mission. Again, if you like this one, I'm very happy for you. I know you're probably writing down a very angry comment that I will read, but before you finish, just know that I feel worse about this than you do because I'm the one publicly talking about it. And monetizing off it, I can't even lie, but I'm still publicly talking about it, okay? Sadly, Cars just does not work for me. I'm sorry. Next movie, and do not publish that comment. Okay, so next I'm talking about The Good Dinosaur. This was fine and perfectly enjoyable for families, but pretty unremarkable from Pixar, if I'm being honest. Like, to me, this is just a movie that I've watched and nothing more. I'll start by appraising the movie first though. The introduction was pretty strong. I respect the director Peter Sohn, as this was his first movie, and I loved his work on Elemental. His direction here was not bad. It certainly still feels like a Pixar movie because of its emotional core, and visually, this is an absolute stunner as well. Pixar hasn't really missed as far as animation goes, but I believe that this is perhaps a top 5 Pixar film in terms of how it looks. Anyway, I do have quite a lot of issues with this one, so let's get into that. Firstly, Arlo, you are a coward. I'm not even going to safeguard you. I would have just killed Spot if I was in Arlo's situation with absolutely no hesitation. I also find it very unusual how the two just instantly forgive each other when they're finding their way back home. Like, brother. I would not be nearly as forgiving as Arlo if my father just died. Anyway, the whole story of Arlo just finding his way back home just felt really stretched out to me. I feel as if so much of this movie could have gone to a DVD deleted scene pack. Come to think of it, this movie probably would have been infinitely better if it were a Pixar short with little to no dialogue. I don't think I'll ever really want to watch The Good Dinosaur ever again, but it was fine for what it was. Moving on, I have Cars 2. Despite having its fans, this is the only Pixar film to have received the rotten status among critics. I actually don't think it's terrible. As a matter of fact, I slightly preferred it over Cars 1, which I know is a very unpopular opinion, but what's new for me, guys? I'm trying. Now, there is a lot of stuff that you can fault about Cars 2. It's a spy movie, which is cool, but it's also a very dumb spy movie, so in the end it kind of results in a guilty pleasure, at least for me. First, the good. Seeing all of these international locations where the racing takes place was nice. I love the whole world tour aspect. Hearing Michael Caine's voice as Finn McMissile was great. We all love Michael Caine. The opening scene was pretty epic. I can't even lie, some of the action in this movie is pretty cool. Also, there is a lot of death in this movie. With that alone, I don't think I can warrant calling this as awful as the critics called it. Onto the negatives though, as I said before, this movie is very dumb. Having Mater as our protagonist instead of McQueen was not a good choice. While McQueen is funny, likable, and, tolerable, Mater is frustrating, insufferable, and stupid. This movie is aware of this and opts to dive into Mater's unintelligent nature as the emotional core. Look, I've never liked Mater, so this did little to nothing for me emotionally. Like, sure, I kind of felt bad for him, but he's also really annoying, so do I really care? My biggest gripe with Cars 2 though is the lack of racing. We hardly see any racing because Lightning McQueen is no longer who we're focused on. Instead, it's the spy plot, which, like I said before, is pretty dumb. Again, spy movies are cool, so I can't say I was bored. I was just pretty whelmed outside of the climax. I definitely would have put this in the C tier if there was just more racing, but sadly not. All in all, it's not the worst. If you don't take the plot seriously, I think you'll be able to look past the junk and, maybe not find treasure, but something. Take it as you will. I'm not a Cars 2 hater, I just feel pretty modest about it. Kicking off the C tier for our next spot, I Have a Bug's Life. This movie is decent, even if it's not really significant coming from Pixar. This movie's plot is all over the place and is pretty typical, but other aspects of this movie are actually pretty strong. As I just mentioned, while the plot isn't the best, the characters are actually really good. Especially Flick. He's a likable protagonist and didn't come off as annoying to me. I actually felt pretty bad for him. Also, Hopper was actually an intimidating villain with a lot of fantastic dialogue. The circus bugs too were enjoyable and have plenty of funny lines. Love the caterpillar guy, he was hilarious. Full disclosure though, I don't like bugs. As an Australian who practically has to fight for his life against spiders every day, seeing all of these CG bugs with the uncanny 90s animation made me want to take a shower immediately after. I felt the same way with ants. I just didn't mention it in my DreamWorks video. If I were to pick which one of those two I preferred, I'd honestly say ants. I like the more mature aspects of that movie and how it doesn't appeal to kids. A Bug's Life is not bad though, I enjoyed it, but it definitely falls short from other Pixar movies. Even though this is low tier Pixar for me, it's still a pretty decent movie. Just goes to show how good Pixar is. Okay, so next up on my ranking, I have Finding Dory. This is a solid spin-off or sequel, whatever you want to call it, but it's not Finding Nemo. Finding Nemo is better paced, has better writing, and is just more enjoyable. At least to me. Finding Dory is still pretty enjoyable though, even if it's only visually better. The visuals in Finding Nemo still look good to this day, but Finding Dory's visuals actually blow it out of the water. The lighting especially got a major upgrade. I don't want to call Finding Dory's plot bad though, the new characters are enjoyable, and I do like how this movie takes place in a sea institute. It's just that the adventure in the Sea Institute is just kind of silly and full of coincidences. I know Finding Nemo has its fair share of coincidences, but there's a lot more here. Marlin and Nemo's plotline is fine, but as characters they feel very underutilized. They're only really important during the climax to add stakes. The stuff with Dory though is good, very good. The flashback sequences are my personal favorite part of this movie. They're very interesting, well directed, and it's satisfying seeing Dory put everything together. The entire POV sequence we get when Dory falls into the ocean after she's told that her parents may be dead is incredibly powerful. So emotionally, this movie still hits and feels like a Pixar movie. I just have some nitpicks as I mentioned before. It was still totally enjoyable to me though, and I'd recommend it if you like Finding Nemo. Okay, so next up I have Turning Red. I think out of all of the Pixar movies, Turning Red gets the most unnecessary hate, and I believe that's because it's clearly not made for casual Pixar viewers of previous generations. This movie is definitely made for a younger demographic of people, and this was an issue among a lot of viewers since Pixar usually makes more mature content. To me though, Turning Red was a pretty fun one-off. It's a cute coming-of-age story. It's also very funny. Or maybe just cringe, I can't tell. The art style too is cute, I just don't want it to be the norm for Pixar. I still want Pixar to use the style that they used in Lightyear and Soul. The characters look very squishy and well, kiddie. It works well in the context of Turning Red, Luca, and I guess Elio, since these all have coming of age aspects, but please don't normalize it Pixar. Keep trying new stuff with your animation please. Again, the art style here is good, and I like it. All three of these movies serve as good one-offs for it. On to my negatives now though, I don't like May's mother. While the generational conflict is good, May's mother was actually so unfair to May and I just didn't see her as a very understanding or likable mother, even after knowing her backstory. Also, there's a scene later in the movie where May's friends get in trouble from May's mother, and May herself doesn't even bother defending them. She's a good character, but I just saw no reason for her to not stand up for them. She snuck out, she attacked Tyler, and while she was so real for that, she should have just owned up right there and not later in the movie. All in all though, Turning Red is still overhated. It's cute, but nothing really more for me. Kicking off the B tier, I have Toy Story 4. I was debating for a while whether I should put this in the C or B tier, but after extensive thought, I settled for the B tier. To me, this is a movie with extreme high highs, but severe low lows. Starting with those high highs though, the visuals, compare this to the first Toy Story, the lighting, the character models, they all look really clean. Woody's identity conflict is another high point for this movie. For a fourth movie, the themes that are explored about purpose and identity are very good, powerful, and the new characters such as Gabby Gabby, Forky and Bo well support the additional themes. So I think thematically, Toy Story 4 might be the strongest of the bunch. However, in all other aspects, it's kind of a downgrade. Firstly, I do not like the pacing. Somehow this movie feels so slow yet so fast at the same time. It's kind of hard to explain. There are just too many characters, and while they're good, it's just often overwhelming, and it's a shame really because we don't see a lot of the other iconic characters outside of Buzz and Woody. Even the ending feels very rushed and anticlimactic. Also, it's just nothing compared to the emotional impact I felt at the end of Toy Story 3. Like the writers here, they were cooking with the themes, they just forgot to make a cohesive narrative. Instead of making a sequel, I feel like Pixar could have just explored these same themes through a Disney Plus TV series that could have taken place between one of the previous movies, because let's be real, no Pixar ending is ever going to top the one from Toy Story 3. Toy Story 4 is not bad though, it just barely squeezes into the B tier. Next up I have Luca. If you think that I'm ranking this one quite low, just know that this is still the B tier. Everything that I put in this tier is what I believe to be good, and this goes for all of my videos. To me though, Pixar just has a lot of better films than Luca. Luca is a sweet watch, but just not a favourite of mine. The characters are fun, the setting is simplistic, it's nice visually, but it's overall just a very chill movie that puts a smile on my face. That's really it. Other movies on this list that I've ranked higher feel more memorable, hit me harder emotionally, and just generally speak to me a lot more. The movie is definitely at its peak when Luca, Giulia, and Alberto are just vibing in the Italian town, which is why I was not the biggest fan of some of their character conflicts. It forces Luca and Alberto to break up, which is fine I guess, the plot does need to move, and I do have to admit Alberto's comeback in the climax was pretty sick, but I just didn't really feel too much emotional impact from it at all. Maybe if you ship Luca and Alberto, you'll be pretty heartbroken by their breakup. Also, I found Alberto to be a bit of a jerk towards Luca and his astronomy interests. Like, okay, Alberto's backstory is pretty sad. I don't blame him for feeling jealous regarding Giulia, but what he tried to pull off with revealing his identity was just not on. I have hiccups with Luca, but the movie is still good. I do enjoy it. In my heart though, Pixar just has better movies. Next up, I have Up, which is my least favourite film from Pete Docter. It's still good though. Pete has never made a bad or even average movie in my eyes. He's just that great of a writer and director, and I admire his work a lot. He helped make Pixar the studio that it is today, and I'm very thankful that he's leading the company. Anyway, Up is still sadly a bit on the overrated side for my liking, which I'm sure is a very unpopular opinion since this is the only one of Pete's films that has been nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. My main issue with Up is the actual adventure itself. I found it to be pretty standard and just not all that interesting. I much more enjoy the more emotional parts of the movie. The rest of the movie to me is just a typical adventure film, but you know what? The villain was at least good, and Russell and Carl have a very nice relationship. Like I said, this is still a good movie despite being my least favourite from Pete, but I just won't rush to rewatch it over his other movies. Onward is up next on my ranking. You know what? I had a pretty sweet time with Onward. While not being a Pixar great, I'd describe it as a comfort watch. Onward has a lot of good stuff going for it. The D&D setting is cool, Tom Holland and Chris Pratt have great chemistry here, and so do their animated counterparts. And when this movie pushes for its emotion, it's done very well. Everything in the climax is done perfectly. The moment when Ian realized that Barley served as his father figure his whole life is very heartwarming. The adventure itself also hits for those same emotional beats at times. However, when it doesn't, it can feel a little slow and underwhelming. The visuals are good too. The environment design is really impressive. I would have liked a little less raw grassland, but it's still good. Anyway, as for my negatives for Onward, as I mentioned before, the adventure can feel a little bit slow, especially when the movie isn't doing all that much with Ian and Barley's relationship. Where this movie sets up can also be a little confusing. While the D&D setting is really cool, I don't understand why magic was essentially abandoned in this world if it could still do many things that technology couldn't. I get that only a select few could learn magic, but to go as far as to be completely abandoned is a little unrealistic. It's forgivable though, and this issue doesn't limit enjoyment, I'm just being picky. Onward was still totally enjoyable, and I would recommend it. Big surprise up next, I have Cars 3. Hopefully I can remedy my relationship with the Cars fans here, because Cars 3 was actually really good in my opinion. After watching Cars 1 and 2, I kind of wrote off these movies as not for me, when in reality those movies just never gave me what I really wanted out of a Cars film. And that thing is... racing. Unlike the first two Cars movies, which prioritize other aspects over racing, Cars 3 is full of it. Not just that, but I never really felt endeared by Cars 1 and 2, but Cars 3 actually has a great message about change. Like, McQueen has a full-on midlife crisis here, and it honestly hits. I'll tell you what is masterful filmmaking. That one scene with Cruz and McQueen out in the woods. They're feeling confident before the big race against Storm, but Lightning's number falls on a rock, decayed. And the way in which the scene is composed, with the music fading out and the low lighting, is just perfect. Like, dare I say 10 out of 10 here. The movie itself is sadly not 10 out of 10 though, and still has its fair share of hiccups. While I did just say that this movie is all about racing, I partly lied. The story sometimes loses focus with Cruz being a rookie and all. It didn't really subtract from my experience, and I guess they did need to establish that she's inexperienced, so I guess it's forgivable. There was a fantastic scene with her and McQueen later on though. Would have liked a bit more of that. You can also argue that Jackson Storm is a pretty average villain, but I think he served his purpose. All in all though, I really like this movie and it's my favourite of the trilogy. Okay, so next I have Lightyear. I found Lightyear pretty hard to rank because it doesn't feel very Pixar. I'm saying this because Pixar usually experiments with abstract ideas, makes fantasy worlds, or sometimes both. And when they don't, they usually have a story that's very emotionally focused, like in Turning Red, The Incredibles, and WALL-E. Lightyear, on the other hand, is just a full-on sci-fi action-adventure film with the Toy Story intellectual property attached to it. It has emotion, but it's not nearly as focused on. Because of this, I was just kind of unsure on where to rank it among Pixar's catalogue. But hey, a change of pace is good, there's nothing wrong with that. In the end, I just settled on one criteria to determine its rank, and that criteria is enjoyment. I enjoy Lightyear. As a sci-fi action-adventure flick, this movie definitely succeeds, and the animation is incredible. The level of detail into, well, everything is immaculate. I also actually didn't even notice that Chris Evans was playing Buzz this time around instead of Tim Allen. He was a really good replacement. Buzz's companion Socks was very enjoyable too. I swear, if I read one comment saying that the only reason I like this movie is because my name is Andy too, I will crash out. But onto Buzz's arc that I mentioned before. It's good, but other aspects of this movie really suffer because of it. Firstly, the rookies. They're fine, but they screw up so many times to the extent that I don't really blame Buzz for not wanting to work with them. I understand that them being flawed individuals made Buzz realize that he's flawed himself. It fits into his character arc well, but I honestly would have just preferred a movie where Buzz and Socks take down an alien robot. Speaking of which, let's talk about the alien robot Zurg. There's good stuff and bad stuff about him. First, the good. I like his intimidating and ambiguous presence. I also like the twist from a character writing perspective. Having a divergent figure as our protagonist be the villain is very smart and fits into his arc well. However, as for the bad, yeah, none of it really makes sense. From my memory at least, the movie doesn't introduce the idea of backwards time travel before the twist, and I also just find it very hard to believe that Buzz just stumbled across this unguarded alien tech. I feel like there was definitely missed potential here. If he was Buzz's father instead of this, that would be a legendary moment. Like Toy Story 2 made a joke about that to reference The Empire Strikes Back. If they had carried this joke into Lightyear, that would have been amazing. Overall, while I have problems with Lightyear, I still find it to be enjoyable and worthy of being ranked this high. Alright, next up I have the brand new Pixar film, Elio. If I'm being real, I had no expectations for Elio. I hated the trailers and thought it seemed like a typical kids film, but I'm here to report that you should not judge the movie based off the trailers. Elio actually had a lot of heart put into it, and despite the somewhat empty theatre I was in, I swear it was like me, my mother, and like one other family in the theatre. But yeah, despite that, I still had a good time with Elio, and found it to be the second best science fiction film from Pixar. Now, there are some typical aspects to Elio. It's not the most mature Pixar movie, far from it actually. The dialogue does feel pretty watered down for kids, and the character arcs are fairly predictable. Is this a problem though? No, not really. While I do appreciate it when kids' films, especially from Pixar, can be a little more complex, I mean just look at Soul, that doesn't stop Elio from delivering an emotional narrative. There is a very heartwarming story here with Elio and his aunt that I think will delight families. The visuals are very fun too, especially the alien designs. It straight up looked like the designers looked around their room and just said, yep, that chair's gonna be an alien, that mat is gonna be an alien. And honestly, I'm all here for it. The designs are very creative, especially the pink British ambassador and the main villain Lord Grygon. They look pretty sick. Speaking of which, Lord Grygon as the villain of this story was sadly just what I expected. He looks cool, but the movie needed to kind of push for his threat harder. There is some good stuff with him and his son, who Elio made friends with, but as a villain, his design and voice actor are the best parts of him. Anyway, I don't really want to spoil much else here about Elio because I think that you should check out this movie for yourself, as we need to support animated originality in Hollywood. I was determining for a while whether I should put this above or below Lightyear. In the end, Lightyear feels less watered down for kids and has more action, but I found Elio to be more endearing. In the end, I think I slightly preferred Elio, even if it's a little sillier. I would check Elio out if you are interested. Not a strong recommend, but still a recommend. Up next, I have Brave. I feel like Brave has been done pretty dirty over the years. I'm actually kind of astonished to see this movie quite low on a lot of people's Pixar rankings. To be fair though, I put Cars so low, so maybe you shouldn't take my opinion at all. Trust your own judgment when it comes to this stuff, guys. I'll say my opinion anyway though, because I'm not afraid to admit it. Brave was very enjoyable to me. The direction in this movie is actually kind of peak. I'm not trying to sugarcoat it, I genuinely mean that. The Scottish setting here is fantastic, and the environments look fantastic. I personally love Scottish settings, my favourite being Braveheart, but the addition of fantasy here is very welcomed and it's just really cool to me. So many shots of this movie are expertly crafted as well. The entire sequence in the Ruinated Kingdom actually used to scare me when I was younger, and I see why, it kind of had me tweaking on rewatch. The entire mystery surrounding Merdu is my personal favourite part of the film, as you can see similarities between his story and the current one with Merida and her mother. I do see the bear plot with Merida and her mother receive a lot of negative criticism. I don't get it, like, come on guys, it's sweet. A lot of the humour from Brave also caught me pretty off guard. Lots of nudity in this movie. Random, but you know what? Why not? I also just love Kelly MacDonald as the voice of Merida. She's in Trainspotting and I just think that she's a fantastic actress. Anyway, back to Brave. While I do think that this movie is a little underrated, it's not Pixar's best. I really don't like how the witch that Merida gets the spell from doesn't even bother telling Merida what the spell actually does. The movie knows that it's a little ridiculous, so the writers opted to point out that the witch had forgotten something immediately after Merida gets the spell. Even so, Merida, I wouldn't be trusting shady food from a witch. The pop songs were a little random too. I know that this is technically a coming-of-age story, so it works in that sense, but I think it clashes hard with the Scottish setting. Overall, I thought Brave was good though. Not Pixar's best, but sweet, heartfelt, and deserves a tad bit more love. Rounding out the B tier, I have The Incredibles 2. This movie is enjoyable, but sadly nowhere near the level of the original. Do not get me wrong though, this does not mean that it's a bad movie. The Incredibles 1 is, well, incredible, and one of my favourite Pixar movies. The only aspect where I'll say The Incredibles 2 is better is in the animation department, but there are still aspects of this movie that I would say are on par with the first. Firstly, the direction. Look, Brad Bird knows how to do action and suspense. His vision for the fight scenes here can really be felt. My favourite moment being the fight with the puppet Screenslaver. Everything from how this scene is composed to the use of audio and lack of motion blur with the flashing lights is just simply immaculate. Secondly, the dialogue in the script is pretty bloody good. It flows through each scene very well and is pretty well delivered by all the voice actors. The story in the script itself is where my issues start to surface. The movie swaps the roles of Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl from the first movie, with Elastigirl on the main mission and Mr. Incredible dealing with the family. Almost everything in the main plot with Elastigirl is fantastic and I love it. Everything with Mr. Incredible though is sadly just pretty whelming at best. Mr. Incredible has a great character crisis here, but they don't tie it into the third act well, and a lot of the stuff with Jack, Violet, and Dash really fills up the runtime, and I wish that it was instead dedicated to the plotline with Elastigirl. Compare this to how Brad Bird did it in The Incredibles 1, and you can't help but feel like that this is just a downgraded version of the first movie. Even the twist villain just doesn't have the same intimidating presence that Syndrome or the puppet Screenslaver had. As I said before, it's still good, but the first movie is a lot better. It just misses out on the A tier. Very excited for Incredibles 3 though. Kicking off the A tier, I have Elemental. Is it a little early to put Elemental this high? Probably, but I don't really care. I really love this movie. Because this is a rom-com, it goes down as a very comforting watch for me. I like rom-coms a lot, I should be watching more of them if I'm being honest. I swear I've seen this movie a concerning number of times since its release. I don't even think it's perfect or top tier Pixar, I just find it to be so sweet. I have minor issues with this movie that are worth addressing though. While I do think that the love story, immigrant struggle, and father-daughter conflict have fantastic synergy, the actual world building in terms of the racial metaphor that they went for is flawed. Do not get me wrong, the world building itself from a designer perspective is absolutely astronomical. I want to live here, why is our current world so boring? But that's besides the point. I'm more so talking about how this movie didn't bother fleshing out the other elements outside of the fire and water races and who they are supposed to represent in our society. To this movie's credit though, I do actually really like how the introduction tells us about how different elements have joined the city over time without any dialogue. I appreciate that a lot. As for my one other issue, this thing, I want to kick him, I want to beat him, I want to dig him up, I hate this thing so much, I owe Mater an apology. Otherwise, no, I absolutely adore Elemental. The love story is very cozy. I found Ember's internal conflict to be pretty powerful and actually pretty complex, especially for a kid's film. I appreciate how well-rounded she is as a character, and it makes her feel like a real person. The visuals here are really something special as well. This is the best looking Pixar movie, and I think we can all agree on that. Thomas Newman's score is also fantastic and gives this movie a very unique and foreign feel. What I mostly appreciate about Elemental though is how there are no big names in the cast. I don't know about you, but I found that to be very refreshing. Pixar didn't rely on big actors and actresses to help market this movie. This was an entirely original film, and I feel all of the heart that went into this movie every time I watch it. It brings me a lot of confidence that Hollywood might try with more originality when it comes to animation. This is a very underrated movie to me, and I think it's a good choice to put on after a long rough day. I love Elemental, and it never fails to cheer me up at least. Now we have got ourselves a classic, Toy Story 1. We just went from the most beautiful looking Pixar film to probably the ugliest. Honestly, what I just said was a bit uncalled for. Despite the animation clearly being dated 30 years later, I never saw it as being distracting on rewatch. If anything, I saw it as being rather charming, knowing that this movie sparked a trend of almost what all future animated movies would look like. Again, it is dated, and some of the environments look like Pokemon Scarlet and Violet on Switch 1, but I still kinda like it here. Toy Story 1 is undoubtedly one of the funniest Pixar movies, and I believe that's largely because of how much great chemistry Tim Allen and Tom Hanks have when recording their lines. Or maybe it's just the goofy and cursed expressions from the animation. Woody and Buzz are just so fun to watch here, and I'm glad they spend the whole movie together. What really makes Toy Story 1 though is how good Woody's character arc is. The moment in Sid's room where Buzz is strapped to the rocket is so good. Everything that Woody says here essentially completes his arc. This movie is by all means a classic, though it doesn't rank higher for me personally because outside of that one scene in Sid's room that I just mentioned, Toy Story 1 doesn't provide much emotional investment for me. The other movies that I ranked higher make me feel more dramatic emotions, plus movies that rely on comedy just aren't the most rewatchable to me at least. I just see Toy Story as a revolutionary film with lots of humor and heart. For that reason, I don't think I can really fault it. It's a good movie, I like it. Toy Story 2 is next. This and Toy Story 1 are both great movies and Pixar classics that are like neck in neck in terms of their placement for this ranking. In the end, I think I slightly preferred this one though, as I just found it to be a bit more fun. I hadn't actually seen Toy Story 2 in quite some time, so I admittedly had trouble remembering a few parts of the story prior to my rewatch. I knew the outline of the plot well enough, with Woody getting kidnapped by Al, and I knew that Woody's gang would break into Al's apartment with the ambition of saving Woody, but I was struggling to recall if Woody would actually choose to go with them or not. If Woody insisted not to, I feared as if that would have made him pretty unlikable to me and could have sabotaged the whole movie. Thankfully, they handled his character very well here. The flashback scene with Jesse is so sad, so I don't blame him for having the thoughts that he does here. And I also love how it foreshadows what's to come for Woody in the third movie. Everything in Woody's plotline is just very, very smart. The other plotline with the gang is very good too. I especially love the addition of the second Buzz and Zurg. They were so much fun and made their plotline even more engaging. Stinky Pete was a pretty neat villain too. I didn't guess his twist when I first watched this, though looking back, I'm still confused on how Jessie didn't see Pete tamper with the remote. Was she sleeping or something? I don't know. Toy Story 2 is overall pretty great, but in my heart, Toy Story 3 is still the best, and I will talk about that one soon. Finding Nemo is up next for me. There is just so much heart to be seen everywhere in this movie. It's one of Pixar's most emotionally investing, and heartbreaking for that matter, alongside being lighthearted and enjoyable for the whole family. I love this movie. I even have 2 copies of it. That's right, you think you're a true Finding Nemo fan? Well, I don't see you sitting here with 2 copies. Anyway, as I was saying, Finding Nemo is great. I would not put it in S tier however. I love it, do not get me wrong. While it meets all the criteria for being an S-tier Pixar movie, I do think that it has some pacing issues. While the adventure underwater is a visual highlight, I felt a large discrepancy in my enjoyment between the adventure and Nemo's plotline. The friends Nemo makes in the tank are fun, the Willem Dafoe fish especially, but there are just some scenes in their plotline that I think could have easily been cut out. Also, just the way in which their scenes are distributed across Marlin and Dory's adventure just kind of felt awkward to me. And that's not to say Nemo's plotline was bad or anything, I was just not nearly as whelmed when watching their plotline in comparison to the underwater adventure. Still, this is not a big issue. Also, I actually didn't even find Dory to be all that annoying. There's a scene around the end with her and Marlin that really hit. Finding Nemo is also just a visual stunner. I can just imagine how mind-blown people were by the look of this movie back in 2003. Oh, and don't even get me started on Thomas Newman's original score. It's simply magical. There's no other way to describe it. It just adds to the atmosphere of an already stunning underwater world. Overall, I do love Finding Nemo. It's great and one of Pixar's most iconic. It may have my heart, but I'm not ranking it higher. Next movie. Kicking off the top 10, I have Monsters University. I think I might have ranked this higher than most, so with that logic, I'm calling this one underrated. I know I've called half the Pixar movies underrated, but you get the point. This is just a ridiculously fun movie. I enjoyed Sully and Mike's dynamic a lot, and the challenges they go through in the scare games. There is a lot of fantastic energy in this movie, and I think Randy Newman's score really gives it a vibe. Monsters University personally spoke to me a lot because of its message about ambition, and how certain dreams just can't be accomplished despite the effort you're willing to put in. I feel like I rewatched this movie at just the perfect time in my life where I'm debating my career pathways. This is also just a really unique message to portray in a kids film too. And while I don't get how Mike isn't apparently scary, if you look past that, I think you're left with a really powerful movie. The entire last third of this film to me is absolutely perfect. You can just feel the contrast between how happy Mike was to win the scare games to just 10 or so minutes later in the desaturated, dimly lit human world. The direction here is great. The biggest downgrade from Monsters Inc. here though is definitely the humor. Monsters Inc. is hilarious and that is a fact. But I sadly just didn't find myself laughing nearly as much from this movie. As for upgrades from Monsters Inc., the most notable thing here is the animation. Everything here just looks really nice. Though I still do love the uncanny animation from Monsters Inc. All in all, Monsters University meant a lot to me. Definitely a worthy prequel. Next up, I have Inside Out. I prefer Inside Out 2 personally, but I still love Inside Out 1. I believe this to be Pixar's most creative movie. Like, how do you even come up with a movie about personified emotions controlling a girl? I don't know, but what I do know is that Pete Docter is a filmmaking genius. The entire adventure around Riley's mind is incredibly creative and all the way through engaging. My favorite part of the adventure was when joy and sadness descend into the place where Riley keeps her fears, which later causes her to have an awakening. It was just really cool. I love the direction here. The characters of joy and sadness also have some very good writing. The actual message itself about how sadness is an important way of expressing ourselves hits very hard and makes you really think about how you manage your emotions. Yeah, let me just express the sadness I felt after witnessing Bing Bong's death. Pixar, I was like 8 years old and you gave me permanent emotional scars. Somebody pay for my therapy. With all seriousness, this moment is depression fuel. Michael Giacchino delivers what I consider to be my favorite track in the OST. It's called Tears of Joy, and I'm not afraid to say that it makes me cry. It is so good. The plotline with the other emotions is okay. It doesn't take up too much screen time, and I would have enjoyed seeing more of it, and that's mainly why I prefer Inside Out 2. You just get to see a lot more going on in Riley's life in that movie. Inside Out 1, though, is very well crafted, and Pixar's most creative in my opinion. Coco is up next on my list. Okay guys, I have something to admit here with this movie, so listen up. Excluding Elio, which just released, out of every single Pixar movie, Coco was the only one that I'd only seen once. And even then, I vividly remember arriving to the cinemas late. And from my rewatch, I believe that I missed out on at least the first 10 minutes. So in other words, I'd never actually seen this whole movie before rewatching it now. Despite missing out on the start, I did actually remember liking Coco, though not to the extent that I did on this rewatch. This movie is banging, and I believe it to be one of Pixar's best. Pixar has of course cooked up another visual stunner here. I was rewatching this on my laptop at night, and the colors were just so vibrant, it felt like they were coming out of my display. Coco is noticeably one of the darker Pixar movies, with many heavy moments like betrayal and death being present. Coco is also just like very sad, but also so beautiful at the same time. I guess that's just how Pixar does it. I don't believe this movie to be spot on perfect though. I don't really love how mean Miguel's family is to Miguel's passion for music. Like, yeah, of course they don't like music because they believe it took Hector away from them, but going as far as to breaking Miguel's guitar? Like, come on bro, that is uncalled for. Also, midway through the movie, Hector and Miguel have an argument that is just so illogical to me. Like, Miguel straight up chucks the photo that is the only surviving grace and chance that Hector has. If he doesn't have that photo put up in time, he is literally going to fade and die. Like, Miguel, damn, I did not know you were like that. But yeah, with all seriousness guys, I do really like Coco. I had a great time with it and I can see why it's so loved. Definitely a Pixar great. Next up, I have Inside Out 2. I really think that this is just about as good as you can expect from an Inside Out sequel. I really love this movie and even prefer it over the original. Unpopular opinion, I know, but what's new for me? It builds on the same concepts and ideas that Pete created from the first movie flawlessly. It still manages to be as funny, and as a teenager myself, I just found it to be more relatable. I believe I have seen this movie about 3 times now, and I just seem to love it more and more. The entire climax really gets my heart rate up every single time because of how intense the situation with Riley feels. This scene goes incredibly hard, and I love how it's all resolved. Unlike Inside Out 1, the plotline at headquarters gets a lot more screen time, and I really enjoyed seeing how these new emotions attempt to manage Riley's life. My favourite emotion was embarrassment. For all I care, anxiety can get thrown into the dump. Actually, better yet, let's throw her into the incinerator. Now, does Inside Out 2 feel a little derivative of the first movie? Yeah, it follows a fairly similar plot with the emotions. A few of them get lost and they just work their way back to headquarters. Regardless, I felt like there was enough going on with Riley's life for me to forgive that the adventure isn't as creative or as fresh as the original. The stuff in the adventure though is still pretty creative, and I really enjoyed having all 5 main emotions here with joy and sadness now. This is my only negative for the movie, but I don't love how mean the other emotions are towards Joy at the start of the adventure. Like, come on, they had no right to be so aggressive. Joy's crash out was totally reasonable. That's all I really have to say about Inside Out 2. I prefer it over the original and found it to be very relatable. Kicking off the S tier, I have WALL-E. WALL-E just barely misses out on the top 5, and that kind of hurts because this is still a fantastic movie. As a matter of fact, I believe this to be the best directed Pixar movie. There is almost like no dialogue in the introduction, and it's so refreshing. Everything about how humanity abandoned Earth is all just shown and not told through any of the characters, and it works so well. Something like this requires some really smart direction, and Andrew Stanton absolutely outdid himself. Not just that, but I also believe this movie to have the best use of a soundtrack in a Pixar film. While Thomas Newman's score is fantastic, it's actually not my personal highlight. Rather, it's the use of songs from musicals during various scenes. WALL-E is a humanoid character who shows much interest in humanity, and the use of musicals really brings that all together. It's incredibly smart and works really well when you consider that the context of this movie is humanity. Furthermore, the use of live action here is quite simply genius. This is the only Pixar film that has incorporated live action into animation, and Andrew Stanton does it flawlessly. They only use live action to show the political side of humanity, and it's smart because this movie is a political satire. There are also some religious interpretations if you really dig into it, with by and large being allegorical for a false god. I was originally going to put this in the A tier because of a plot hole I picked up. I just don't see why Eve didn't take off the kill switch that the robots on the Axiom put on her. They use it to turn her off later, and it kind of pissed me off since she could have just taken it off. In the end though, it is totally forgivable. WALL-E is still well deserving of the S tier. Toy Story 3 is my next S tier. This is the best Toy Story, and nobody will ever convince me otherwise. I don't care how good Toy Story 5 may end up being, Toy Story 3 has and always will have my heart. This was my favourite as a little 6-year-old, and it still is. Out of all of the Toy Story movies, this is the one that makes me look back on the days when I played with my toys. Or should I say, Skylanders. As someone who was born in the late 2000s, I was actually autistic about these things. This might sound funny, and a little ridiculous, but watching the ending of Toy Story 3 makes me feel sad that I no longer play with my Skylanders. It's as if I've forsaken them like the Andy in this movie. The ending with Bonnie and Andy is just so sweet, and it gets me teary every single time. It should have been the end of Toy Story. I like Toy Story 4, but like I said with that movie, they could have explored those same themes with Andy instead of Bonnie through a streaming series. Toy Story 3 is also noticeably darker than the rest of these movies. Because this is a prison escape movie, which is just super cool in itself, there is a large sense of claustrophobia felt. And there's even a dark and green tint in the color grading in a few scenes here. I'm sorry, but this was a straight up horror film when I was 6. That monkey that was on surveillance actually used to scare me. Even the motives for the villain Lotso are incredibly dark. He is a great villain too, with quite the intimidating presence. All of the new characters were very enjoyable too. Barbie and Ken were hilarious. What can I say really, Toy Story 3 just has it all for me. Well deserving of the top 5. Monsters Incorporated is up next. This is Pete Docter's debut feature, and it still holds up as one of Pixar's best. Dare I call this a perfect family feature. Everything that could possibly be wanted in a family movie is here. The creativity here is some of Pixar's best. Mike and Sully have fantastic synergy, the villains are also fantastic, the emotion hits hard, I'm going to cry, the soundtrack. Randy Newman, you are a mad lad. I'm sorry, but how do you come up with the idea of associating a jazz theme with monsters of all things, and still have it slap? Even the monster designs work so well in this movie. They're so typical, simple, but that's just what I love about them. They're the type of designs that you would come up with as a child. I haven't even talked about the best part of this movie yet, the comedy. No, I'm not sugarcoating when I say that this is the funniest Pixar movie. I have seen this movie so many times, and I still found myself laughing on my latest rewatch. That's how funny this movie is. Lastly, I do want to talk about one really clever part of this movie, and that's the villain, and how his motivation is corporate greed. To me, that's just shocking, especially for a children's movie that was released by Disney. I for one love it when children's movies can be this mature. Overall, this is a Pixar classic that holds up incredibly well. Definitely a recommend from me if you haven't seen it. This is one of the most likable movies that you will watch. Now, we have The Incredibles. This movie is straight fire. Out of every Pixar movie, I've seen The Incredibles the most times. In other words, I'm highly nostalgic for this movie, and I know the entire script front to back. Thank goodness it's a bloody good script though. The Incredibles is just so much fun. It's just as action-packed as it is suspenseful and emotionally engaging. First, let's talk about the action. It is so good. The fights against the Omnidroids are very creative and they make great use of the animated environments. The design of Syndrome's Island is incredibly impressive for 2004. As for the city environments, they can look a little dated, but they still make it work really well during the action. Now let's talk about the use of suspense in this movie. It is fantastic and the result of smart direction from Brad Bird. The scene with Gazerbeam in the underground cave is very well done, but compare that to the hacking sequence that soon follows. The music just keeps on getting more and more intense, and I love how it flips between Elastigirl's plotline. This is the scene that really makes you realize and feel the threat that Syndrome has now, with how many superheroes he's killed with his Omnidroids. As for the family drama, while The Incredibles 2 didn't manage the family drama nearly as well, The Incredibles 1 flawlessly intertwines it with the main spy plot. There is nothing unnecessary filling up the runtime here. Overall, The Incredibles is incredible, easily in the top 3 for Pixar. It is not Brad Bird's best work though, because taking the second spot, I have Ratatouille. I for one have never met a Ratatouille hater, and I don't think I ever will. I believe this to be one of the few movies with 0 to no haters. Screw The Godfather, screw Pulp Fiction, Ratatouille is where it's at. Ratatouille is just so fantastic because of how moving the story is. The message is about art, and it's portrayed through cooking, a highly complex art form that requires much thought. This is a movie that almost everyone can relate to in some way, because as humans we have the desire to create. The movie's message isn't that everyone can become a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere. What does Brad Bird mean by this? Well, Remy the rat is the great artist in this context. You know, rats, disgusting creatures that contaminate food. I don't know about you, but I hate these things. Despite everything, everyone, and literal logic telling Remy that he can't follow his passion for creating food, he still strives to do it anyway, because where you come from does not define who you are. Remy even impresses critics, and Linguini, the person who everyone looks towards when it comes to cooking, due to his family name, supports how not everyone can be great at cooking. All he did was serve as Remy's puppet. Not only are these two characters just masterfully written, but they are just so much fun to be around, and their interactions are hilarious. Ratatouille is just a very moving story with some incredibly smart dialogue. And then we get Michael Giacchino's incredible score as we fade to black. What a masterpiece. For quite some time, Ratatouille was my number one for Pixar. However, in recent times, one other Pixar movie has really grown on me. And what movie might that be? Well, it's...
Pause. Hi, my name's Pi, and I've interrupted Andy's marvelous movie app to give my testimony as to why our boy Linguini is the number one hottest, best, character in Pixar history. First of all, let's look at the obvious. He's got some very quite defining facial features, such as his two big brown eyes that peer deep into my soul, that big honker of a nose that sniffs out my deepest secrets, plus a set of gargantuan ears that listen to the pounding he brings to my aching heart. And don't forget how much he loves getting his hair pulled. I lay awake every night fantasizing about what I'd do if I was his puppet master. Anyway, my time is up and your regularly scheduled program must resume.
But do not forget what I've told you here today. Alfredo Linguini, I love you!
Wait, I'm back? Anyway, as I was saying, my number one Pixar movie is Soul. I remember rewatching Soul around January this year, and on that day, it just did something for me. So much so that I went back to rewatch it a total of 4 times this year so far. Now, I always loved Soul beforehand. I thought it was top 10 Pixar. But I never would have guessed that it would eventually go down as my favorite Pixar film, and as of now, one of my all-time favorites. What I really admire about Soul are its themes and how mature they are. Like, this movie somehow takes all of these complex things about life and makes them easy to understand for children. I believe this to be the most mature movie Pixar has made. I just don't really see most central themes in this movie speaking to kids at all. Life, death, purpose. Like, our protagonist Joe literally dies at the start of this movie, and he does everything he can as a disembodied soul to reach his human body once more. He cheats death to get the gig that he was preparing for, only to find out that it just wasn't what it shaped out to be for him. This movie introduces the idea of a spark. In simple terms, a spark is something that inspires you and is required for an unborn soul to enter Earth. After dying, Joe continues to be fixated on that music is his spark and his purpose in life. But the truth is, life isn't that simple. Seeing him come home, uncontent with life, after fulfilling his passion and his dream is just so haunting to me. Everything about the epiphany scene that soon follows is the closest you can get to animated perfection. When Joe lays down all of the mementos that 22 collected, while simply just trying to prepare for his gig, he realizes that he had been so busy trying to put music towards his purpose in life that he never stopped to realize how each moment stood on its own, and how he took all of the other beautiful things in life for granted. 22, just by simply living, made him realize this. And that's why the ending of this movie works. It secures the movie's message because Joe's life still isn't over. He still needs to find his purpose in life. He doesn't know how he's going to do it, but what he does know is that he's going to be living every minute of it. Alongside these powerful and rather mature messages for kids, there is just so much to enjoy even for the younger ones who can't relate to these themes. It's gorgeously animated. I love the contrast between the otherworldly essence of the youth seminar in the astral plane to the realistic environments in the human world. The vibes and contrast that you feel with these locations are made even better by the original score, which to put it simply is absolutely mesmerizing. This movie might just also have Pixar's best sound design as well. I really appreciate and love how this movie never directly tells us what 22's spark was. I mean, I'm sure you can theorize, but I think doing so kind of misses the point. It's kept ambiguous on purpose because what 22's spark is doesn't matter. You can draw parallels between this and what Joe goes through, and the answer is clear. Just like Joe, whatever her spark is not her purpose. If anyone you know ever says that modern Pixar is no good, show them this movie and ask that exact same question after. This is Pete Doctor's best work in my opinion, and the best Pixar movie. If you haven't seen this movie, well great, I've just spoiled the whole movie for you, but watch it anyway, this movie is my therapy. And there you have it, that's my Pixar ranking. Obviously, please don't take what I say in this video too seriously. At the end of the day, it's night, and these are just movies made as an enjoyable way to pass the time. What you just watched was my personal opinion of them. Nothing I said was completely objective. I would love to read your opinions down below. Just like DreamWorks, I will give you a heart if you comment down your personal ranking of these movies. If you do want to see more reviews from me, I do have a Letterboxd. I don't write reviews all that regularly, but the next time I do a movie marathon for one of these videos, I will be using it. Follow me over there if you would like to keep track of these videos. Link in the description, and that's all folks. See you later, God bless.